good morning, everybody. This is Ashu Tandon. Thanks for joining our live series chat. Today, we'll be talking with my good friend and our head of our biologics development and manufacturing group, Dr. Dhananjay Patankar. And we will start in just about a few seconds from now with a short corporate video giving you an overview of Syngene. Hi, Dhananjay. I don't know about you, but every time I listen to that video and the music, it always gives me the goosebumps.
Feels like watching a movie, huh?
Yeah, I know.
No, it doesn't get old.
It doesn't get old. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So once again, welcome everybody. I see we have a good number of visitors already in. We have about 53 attendees out of the 69 that have registered. So thank you very much for joining in today. As I start with introducing Dhananjay, it would be really helpful if everybody can go to the chat window, which is on the right-hand side, and just type in the location that you're joining in from. So if you're from the US or New York, USA, if you're from Bangalore, just write Bangalore, India. It would be really useful. The way to access the chat is on the right-hand side of the screen. There's a red rectangle with 3 white dots. So once you click on those white dots, a window opens up allowing you to click on the chat button over there. So that's I see a large number of people have already started sending their messages. So thank you, everybody. Dhananjay, I'm going to start with a quick introduction of yours. I mean, you've had a very illustrious background, a really illustrious career, and I know you've earned a very, very, very respected name in the profession. So I'm going to try to do it some justice, but please fill in if I've missed anything,
Yeah, just don't embarrass me.
No. So after your stint, you did your chemical engineering from IIT Bombay, and so from chemical engineering to large molecule has obviously been a journey over the years, but we'll talk about that in some time. But after doing your engineering from IIT Bombay, which is, for those that don't know, one of the world's most premier engineering institutes in the world. You went on to the University of Utah, where you did your PhD and spent a number of years in the relatively cold climates of Utah. Beautiful ski slopes, but also very cold winters over there as well.
Yeah, and I did some skiing and hiking and camping along with the PhD as well.
Yeah, that's important, right? You got a holistic PhD over there. And post that, you went on to spend some time at the state university close to my home, which is Rutgers University, where you spent a couple of years over there, and then moved back to India in a variety of roles on the scientific side. And most recently, before your stint with Syngene, you were with Intas Biopharmaceuticals, where you were the chief operating officer. And then you joined Syngene to essentially help lay the foundation and grow the biologics business. And in your current role, you're the vice president and head of biologics development and manufacturing. Um, and I also know that you're an animal lover. I also know that you do a lot of charity work in that field, and you have adopted a portion of a zoo, and
With
this
the
is in
cheetah.
Mysore with a cheetah, right? In Mysore,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So if
So,
people go to the Mysore Zoo, there is a cheetah with your name on it.
well, there's a cage with my name on it.
Yeah. Well, that's important, right? Good, good. So once again, Raja, thank you for taking the time for doing this. This series.
Pleasure to be here.
We've been getting a lot of interest from a lot of different stakeholders, our customers, people who are looking to join us, a lot of our employees, trying to get to know more about what it is that we do and what it is that some of our senior leaders do. So,
Mhm.
Dhananjay, would you like to just give us a quick overview of what your department, what your group in Syngene does in biologics development and manufacturing?
Yeah, so as a name suggests, we are involved in large molecules. So as you know, Syngene does, and as we saw in the video, Syngene does everything from discovery through development and into manufacturing. So on the biologics side, which is the large molecules like recombinant proteins, monoclonal antibodies, we have a discovery group that falls under the discovery services, and then we have my group, which really works on taking a molecule that's been identified as a clinical candidate, doing a process development, manufacturing it for clinical supplies, early stage as well as late stage clinical supplies, and eventually commercial supplies. So that's the space that we operate in, post candidate identification all the way into the market.
Okay, wonderful. And given that how the market is, especially over the last 10 years on the pharmaceutical product side has been skewing more and more towards large molecules with a large number of newer discoveries happening in the large molecule space. This must be a really interesting, exciting, and growing area.
Absolutely, it is exciting. The share of biologics in the pharma market has been steadily growing, which is what excites me and all of my colleagues and people in my basically field. So it's really nice to see that, because this biologics can really address some of the healthcare challenges that small molecules cannot. Of course, small molecules have been playing a major part in the pharma world for a long time, but there are things that I think the biologics can do better than small molecules, and so it's nice, and it's also an evolving field. I mean, there are new classes of products that are coming up all the time, so it keeps the learning also on all the time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Just to let you know, we've got about 63 participants on the chat right now on our webinar right now, and we have people from Calgary, Canada, to all the way to Australia. So pretty
Wow.
much large parts of the globe have been covered, with people logging in from Boston, New York, Switzerland, and a number of locations in India as well. So it's a wide.
Welcome to all of you, and it's a privilege for me to be having this chat with Ashu, with all of you participating.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, one can't really start a discussion nowadays without talking about COVID-19. And so, in the work that you just talked about from a large molecule perspective, talk to a little bit about sort of the role that the biologics group could have in terms of combating COVID-19.
Yeah, so Syngene, being in this field, is of course very actively and intimately involved right now in this whole so what we call as Syngene against COVID. Variety of activities that are actually going on. Today, most of those are in the research and testing field, but hopefully, soon there will be candidates, therapeutic and vaccine candidates coming up. Not only from the research collaborations that Syngene is having, but just from various companies out there. And we hope that in some of those we will actually be involved in developing and manufacturing clinical supplies for such therapeutic or prophylactic candidates. We are already in touch with a couple of companies who have some potential molecules that they want to try out. So we are we are in discussions with them. This is happening very, very rapidly, as you can imagine. Normally, people take months to identify their candidate, and then another few months to really figure out how they want to get into the clinic. But now it's all happening over weeks or even days. Very aggressively everybody is moving, and some of the discussions that we are having now, I'm sure they will fructify. Apart from that, my group also does viral testing, because as you know, for large molecules, demonstrating that your product is free of any viral contamination is a regulatory requirement. It's a very important part of the safety of biologic molecules. So we have our own in-house viral testing lab, and there are companies that are developing materials that may have virucidal properties, and then we've done some studies for them already to try and test out whether what kind of antiviral properties they have. So there's a lot that we are doing, very exciting stuff in the fight against COVID.
That's really exciting. And the last part that you mentioned about it from a viral testing standpoint, and this is potentially for applications in end stage use cases such as personal protective equipments, medical devices, things that are in the hospital setting to ensure that
these are not correct. So they're not drugs or vaccines, but just like you mentioned, hospital settings, PPEs, gowns, or other surfaces which can be treated with these materials that can then provide some protection. Of course, right now there is a lot of effort going on. We don't know which ones will succeed. Then there's an issue of scaling up the manufacturing and supply. So there's many steps along the way, but everybody is doing their bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's an interesting thing that you mentioned, right? Where a normal process like this takes months or even years in some cases. People spend their lifetime, their careers in identifying targets and figuring out whether they work or not, and how to sort of developing a therapy for that, right? And we are essentially trying to do in days and weeks what takes years. And what is truly amazing is the massive amount of scientific effort worldwide that's happened on this. At last count, I read an article in Nature over the weekend which said that there are 90 vaccine candidates that are being worked upon right now, and over the next 12 months should go into some kind of trials somewhere or the other. Now, even if you take 50% of them to sort of hit the trial stage, that's a lot of shots on goal. So I'm an optimistic person in terms of seeing how this will play out. What's your view?
No, I think definitely. I'm an optimist too. Something has to work for our own sake. I think it has to work. There's a lot of good science. There are variety of molecules, from small molecules, viral vaccines, mRNA vaccines, antibodies, antibody fragments. They're just such a diversity of approaches that people are trying. I think we should, God willing, have good success in the months to come.
Yeah, exactly. So
when what you mentioned about the timelines, that's been crazy. Also, there are when we're discussing now with some of our partners how to bring these molecules forward towards the clinic. Approaches that would be called perhaps called crazy in normal times are now par for the course. Everybody's saying, okay, how can we eliminate this step, or do these two things in parallel instead of sequential, and can we skip that? And of course, you don't want to create any risk for the patient, but you can take a variety of other risks, including some business risks, some potentially maybe some money extra spent just in order to move faster.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing you mentioned, right? In every crisis that happens, economically, socially, society, and in a pandemic as well, the one thing you also hear is never let a good crisis go waste. So, what do you think from a scientific standpoint and from an operational standpoint are some of the key learnings that we have from this pandemic and you think will change the way we do biologics related work?
So, I talked about how we are trying to compress timelines
Yeah.
from what it would normally take months or a year and a half to, just a few weeks or 6 months. Taking a candidate from having identified one to getting it into an IND stage. There are various estimates, but median around say 12 months. Some people say 9 or 10, some people say maybe 14, 15, but it's roughly in that range. Now people are saying, okay, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, whether all that's possible or not, but that's the target. And once we figure out that it is really doable, my suspicion is that once the pandemic is over, uh, we talk about the new normal nowadays. So the new normal is probably going to be 6 months or less to get products into phase one clinic. So I'm certainly there's going to be a greater push to make some of these newer accelerated timelines as standard. Maybe prepare for them. Maybe analyze what kind of risks there are and build some of those mitigations into the plan. But certainly, I think there will be a it's like tasting blood to some extent, right? You know that you can do it, so now it's like why is that not the standard? And I think we've seen that when a crisis comes along, many things that we even management processes, decisions that would take a long time get taken very quickly. We can adapt very quickly. We can change how we work very quickly. We can move thousands of people to be accessing their data on mobile phones instead of sitting in an office, and having a personal meeting. So many of those things, I'm sure people will start thinking, well, why can't we do this always?
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and it does take an impetus to make some of these changes, and I think that's one of the good things coming out of it. Before I go into the next question, Dhananjay, I did want to say to all of our attendees, and we are up to 65 people right now, that please use the chat window to send along the questions that you would like me to ask Dhananjay, and I will I'll certainly look at those and ask you the questions. Dhananjay, the one question that I have, and it's really critical. I live in New Jersey, and I'm stuck over here, and I haven't been able to visit the site, and truly I don't know when I'll be able to visit the site next. But during this whole national lockdown that happened in India, right from the last week of March to pretty much the whole of April, there were certain parts of our organization that were working as normal or as near as normal as one could in these situations. One of them was the biologics development and manufacturing group. And I think it's a really, really critical part of how you and your team sort of rose to the challenge of making sure that we are able to work on our existing contracts and able to sort of provide an environment that's safe to our employees. Could you talk to me a little bit about how we helped accomplish that, and sort of because beyond COVID there are other illnesses as well, right? And a lot of the work that we do is for a whole range of those. So talk to us a little bit about the experience during that time, some of the things that as an organization we took, and any special things that we did in the biologic space.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and it's been a tremendous team effort internally, because as you can imagine, everything was changing literally on a daily basis. When the lockdown was announced, many things were not clear. Notifications came from the central government. They had to be sort of interpreted at the local level, and that had to cascade down to how the police were implementing it on the ground. So there were a lot of challenges in the beginning. People. One thing I've always experienced over the years at Syngene is people really identify with the projects that they work on. They identify, they look at it as their own projects, and so they're very committed to making sure that those projects succeed. But people actually did face some difficulties in the early days, not knowing whether the police would sort of turn people back, and some housing complexes didn't want anybody moving in and out. Even though as a company we were approved to keep on working as an essential service. So for the first week or 10 days, I think there was a little disruption, and then we deliberately decided to put a pause, at least on the non-critical activities. And when I say non-critical, I mean every project is critical for its owner. But things like clinical supplies or any work where stopping would have meant losing a lot of work you'd already done for on that particular aspect for a week or two. So we decided to keep some of those things going, and some other things where we could perhaps not lose as much in terms of the overall project progress. We decided to put a pause, and then within the company, a number of things were done. We as public transport was not allowed, we hired hundreds of buses to ferry our employees from their residence to office. We decided to put people in shifts so that there's more opportunity for physical distancing at work by reducing the density and footfall, density of people at a time. We provided accommodation to people near the company so they wouldn't have to commute long distances. We obtained passes from the local authorities so that people could display them in their vehicle as they went around. So a lot of work was done at the admin and logistics level to really enable all that. And the big thing, of course, during such times is communication. I mean, there's really that's the most important thing. Whether you're stopping a project, continuing a project, we wrote to all of our clients. We spoke to them. We told them what the risks are. We told them why we are taking certain decisions, whether putting something on pause or continuing it. And then we also told them that there are some stopping points potentially in your project, and we'll try and go to the next stopping point. We'll evaluate the scenario at that time, and then with a sort of a common agreement, we'll decide to continue further till the next stopping point. So we did a lot of that in communication with the clients, and the clients have been very, very supportive. They understood the situation. Of course, many of them had been, are going through similar situation themselves. Some of them shared their own best practices with us. So about 10 days or maybe 2 weeks, we were a little bit, there was some disruption or slowing down of work, but after that it's been quite close to full operational status. And really, I must compliment all the people who work in the company for their commitment and for their willingness to brave some of these odds, because there was a lot of uncertainty. Some of our younger staff faced pressures from their family to not venture out, and risk themselves. And so there's a lot of things that one doesn't see on the surface, but there's stuff going on at the underneath. So I'm happy that broadly we've been able to manage most of our projects with maybe a couple of weeks of delay, but I think we are now back to normal.
Wonderful. I was going to ask you a question in terms of and you address part of it in terms of the communication with the community. This is a unique situation where it's not a problem we are facing in Bangalore, or it's not a problem we are facing on our campus, or it's not a problem that one set of our clients are facing in their location. It's everybody the world over is facing this. It's just a matter of where you are in the timing of it and the spread of it, right? So from that perspective, I think I do want to reinforce what you mentioned, that all our clients have been extremely appreciative of the work that our teams have done, to ensure safety of our staff, continuity of our projects, and have understood logically when we needed to stop them. So I think that's a really key point that you mentioned. In those few days that we had some disruption, and you mentioned about working in shifts and all things like that, we've also had a fair number of people working from home, and
Mhm.
it's a concept that is very alien to a lot of our staff in India, and particularly a lot of the scientific staff that are very used to working with scientific equipment in front of them, and they don't have that at home,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So doing science and work from home in the same sentence are sort of a cognitive dissonance, if you will. So how have you and your teams adjusted to that? And any tips that you have for a lot of the scientific personnel that we have on the webinar?
So, obviously, you can't run an experiment with equipment, or you can't manufacture something from home. You have to be on
Mhm.
site. We aren't yet at the everything remotely controlled and run by robots kind of world yet. That had to be done on site. But there's a lot that you can do, before and after, in terms of your planning, your protocol preparations, and then after the work is over, your data reviews, report writing. A lot of that can be done at home. So that's how you really have to do it, and it's also a good opportunity. Like you said, never let a crisis go to waste. It's also a good opportunity to kind of do some things that you always wanted to do but never got
Yeah.
the time for. We've done some learning exercises. We've had team meetings on Skype and so on to read literature, discuss new techniques, have some of those skill development, skill building type sessions. Team members have done internal seminars on different topics of their own expertise. Our HR has organized a variety of soft skill type programs. So a lot of that has happened, which
Yeah.
in a normal course, sometimes it's difficult to find time to get those things done. So I think it's been time well utilized, I would say.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Dhananjay, I'm going to take a little bit of a pivot over here and focus my attention to the right hand side of my screen. And because
Mhm.
there are a fair number of questions that have come in, so I'm
Okay.
just going to pick up on some of them and ask. So, Michael asks us that what are any unique regulatory and operational challenges that the industry is facing during COVID-19 with respect to large molecule development? Is there something that's come up specifically in this time, or things that you're noticing?
Um, I wouldn't say specifically large molecule development, but pharma
Yeah.
in general. If you're running a GMP manufacturing batch, it's not enough for your manufacturing staff to come in. You need your people coming in to do environmental monitoring. You need your in-process QA staff to come in. You need some other there's a whole host of people that have to come in to run a batch. So that's kind of an operational challenge. Some of the other things were there have been preventive maintenance schedules and calibration schedules, and some of the external agencies either can't come or not allowed to come into the campus right now. So how do you deal with those types of things? Do you deviate from your procedure? Do you do something else? There have actually been some guidances coming out from MHRA and some other agencies. Even the Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance came up with some guidances on how to manage these types of challenges. When how do you approve documents when you're not, especially if you're working with paper documents? How do you approve documents when you're sitting at home and can't put really ink to paper? So there have been some guidances that have come in, and we've adopted those. We've also very quickly moved into digitizing some of these processes to enable, particularly on document management. So yeah, those have been subjects of internal debate over these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. We have a question from Caroline, and the question is that in a world where there is constant pressure on shortening the research timelines, right? What do you think is India's advantage?
So I think shortening timelines requires a lot of creativity, and I believe that there is an element of creativity in among the people that I've worked with, who are you have to constantly think about how can you do it differently, and I do see that that thought process among many of my colleagues. Apart from the India advantage per se, I think when you work with a contract research organization or contract CDMO, CRO, you're actually able to you get two advantages. One is as a CDMO, we kind of combine the best practices that come from variety of our clients. Good ideas on how to do things faster. What are some of the creative ways of doing it? We learn from a variety of our clients, and we are able to bring them all together. The second thing that there's an advantage with a CDMO or a CRO is that some of the stage gates that are there in an internal working environment, or some of the rigidities that sometimes are built into the process in a regular product organization, I think those get I don't want to say bypass in a negative way, but in a positive way, that you kind of avoid some of those rigidities, and you're able to leapfrog those or jump over those stage gates a little bit faster, because now everything is happening in one place, and we can take those decisions a little bit faster. So I think there's that advantage, and the India advantage is really, I think, just in terms of bringing some of that creativity to the table.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point you covered over here. Moving into, there are a couple of questions that have come in that are scientific in nature. So I'm going to focus on that now. One of the questions that has come in is that a virus regularly and constantly mutates, and then so therefore there are multiple strains that develop of the virus, right? And as one is looking for a vaccine for the virus, how do you ensure that you've captured all the different strains that are there? So how does vaccine development sort of take that into account?
So you can do it in different ways. One is you really address that whole variation. So as you know, flu vaccines, for instance, it's really a cocktail of things that target multiple variants. So you're really directly attacking the variants, but you're only attacking the known variants. Obviously it could mutate again. The other approach is that you look for things that don't mutate, meaning even in the structure of a virus, or in the gene sequence or the protein sequence, there are regions that are relatively more conserved, meaning they don't change as much as other regions, and then you can focus your either vaccine or a therapeutic development on those regions that are more conserved. Of course, easier said than done, but those are broad ways that you can approach that.
Yeah. So there are a couple of questions on, and I'll just combine these together, is around repurposing of drugs and sort of a usage of artificial intelligence and computational biology, etc., in achieving that. So can you talk a little bit about what you see as the potential in that space, as well as some of the work that Syngene does in helping clients with repurposing of their existing drugs and therapies?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on the clinical side or the biology of how drugs work, but certainly some drugs developed for other viruses, or some drugs developed for other indications which target certain pathways or certain mechanisms inside the body, are in clinical trials now for to see if they may have an impact on suppressing or curing COVID disease. So that's not really my expertise, but within Syngene we have so you touched on two or three things. One is mechanistic studies, right? So you're understanding how a certain drug actually interacts with the body. And our discovery biology group actually is very much into that. They work on a number of they have animal models, they have in vitro models, they have a lot of DMPK, a lot of those types of things,
Yeah.
where they can look at really the mechanisms of how a drug interacts with the human body, and then see whether those mechanisms also can be put to play in targeting the virus. We have a research informatics group that does structure function modeling and different types of studies that again somewhat predictive, looking at the structure of this virus compared to other targets and how these drugs could play a role. And then we have a clinical development group that can that actually does some amount of clinical work. So
Yeah.
with the combination of this, I think the beauty of Syngene having all of these services is that we can plug the gaps that any external researcher might have, whether a large organization or a small one. If they have some idea on what they how they want to develop a vaccine or a therapeutic approach, we can plug these little gaps, saying, okay, we can help you with some of the modeling, we can help you with some mechanism studies, we can help you a little bit on the clinical side, things like that.
Sure. There's another question that's come in, which I want to focus on, and this is from Peter in the UK, which is with everyone focused on the pandemic, what about other diseases? What about other therapeutic areas? Are they being ignored? What's your view on that? I mean, is a lot of funding going to now be reallocated to infectious diseases, immunity, away from the more traditional oncology, metabolic disorders area, so to speak?
Well, I mean, there is a danger of that happening. Right now, a number of people who are working in, let's say, viral diseases of various kinds have sort of pivoted a little bit to look at the coronavirus as opposed to influenza virus or whatever other virus they've been working on. And as you said, some of the funding might be preferentially channeled towards people working on this particular segment. But I think two things. One, I think it's that will be a temporary blip because, like you said, the other diseases aren't going away, and they'll certainly be here. And those people who have their expertise in whether it's oncology or diabetes or something like this, they're I don't think they're going to just drop everything they have and move into looking at COVID research unless they are in an adjacent area or a related area of expertise. Other than that, I believe that, and I hope that with this pandemic and with how people are realizing that we didn't plan enough for it the world over. One hopes that there will be a greater emphasis on just healthcare in general and research into healthcare. So if the pie grows and if more and more, whether it's government agencies or private equity investors or what have you, invest more in healthcare and just public health and infectious diseases and all sorts of pharma biotech segment in general, I think the pie will go up. So even if temporarily it may be a little bit skewed, I think eventually it'll be good for everybody.
So this is related to how you talked about sort of investing more in healthcare and the hope and the aspiration there. Are there any other ways that you see potentially the world changing in from a post-COVID standpoint? If you had a crystal ball, what do you think would happen? Or since we know you don't have a crystal ball, but what would you like to happen?
Yeah, I would like to be the morning quarterback actually. You're asking me to be the Saturday evening quarterback. I don't know. Of course, many people are saying how things will change. One certainly hopes that the focus on public health, on investment in hospital infrastructure, on a lot of these things, preventive primary facilities, primary care facilities. A lot of that will improve. Hopefully, as more there are. For instance, there are flu vaccines around, right? But I don't know how many people actually take them. Maybe now more people will be, kind of thinking, there are these things out there. Maybe I should really be taking advantage of them and not exposing myself to the risk. So I think people's attention towards really having safe. Basically building up health security, I think will, in general, at an individual level as well as at a societal level, building health security and at national, political level, hopefully that should become a priority, and that will be, I think, a good change for the world.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. A couple of questions that I'm getting in is a request to repeat, some aspects of what Syngene is doing and in our day-to-day work to ensure the safety of our staff. And so if you could just talk about the specific areas that Syngene is focused on in ensuring staff safety.
Right. So, it's been an ongoing, we've been keeping on stepping up some of the things that we did. So very early, we started monitoring the temperature of people coming in as they came into the campus. Now what we have done is we've actually given out thermometers to all our staff, 100% of our staff, and we've told them that they need to measure their temperature and record it on our intranet site once in the morning and once in the evening. And if it's elevated, they don't get on the bus to come to work. So we know that we are so basically trying to prevent anybody who has even the beginnings of a potential infection or at least some symptom, so they don't even get on the bus and then spread it to other people. So that's something we did on the temperature front. Everybody has to give a declaration about their travel, anybody within their home having symptoms and things like this. As I said earlier, we've started working in shifts. So earlier, the majority of our people came 8 to 5. Now we have really distributed that into 2 shifts. So one shift comes from 6 to 2 and the other comes from 2 to 10. Some actually come at night also. So that just to reduce the number of people on site, we've created zones on campus. So we've divided the whole campus into around 10 zones, and we've actually given people their ID badges with the different colored lanyards. So you can tell which zone they belong to, and people have to stay in their zone. They cannot go to another zone. They cannot take a walk in the afternoon. We've created multiple dining areas, one in each zone basically. So people, normally they would go to the central dining area. We've created these dining areas with more spacing, so people don't have to. They maintain a distance while they're at lunch, but also they don't have to cross the zone boundaries. So that if God forbid somebody does test positive, we'll be able to contain it. Their total number of contacts would have been a very limited number. So we'll have just more control over, how that whole thing goes. So that's something we've done. Of course, all the standard things like wearing masks, having hand sanitizers available, extra housekeeping measures to sanitize the floors, the surfaces, all of the commonly touched, door handles, railings, all of that stuff. So there's an army of housekeeping stuff that just goes around doing all this cleaning. So all those basic things are also in place.
Yeah, great.
And every day new ideas come in from others, from their directives from the government. We learn from what other companies are doing, and we keep on implementing those.
Great. Dhananjay, we have time for a couple of more questions. So I'm going to ask on that. One is very technical and is definitely way beyond my pay grade. I'm hoping it's in your alley. Is what will be the role of lyophilization process development for biologics for a vaccine in the coming years?
Lyophilization for So I'm more familiar with therapeutics than vaccines.
Yeah.
So pardon me on that. On the therapeutics for early development, I mean, for let's say for a commercial product, just from a ease of use and so on. Liquid products are generally considered more desired.
Yeah.
Although lyophilized products have a little bit better stability, but liquid products generally considered better for from a presentation point of view for use in the market. But if a product is not stable, or especially as we talked about in the early phase, if you have to really rapidly develop a product, sometimes you may not have time to develop a liquid formulation that is adequately stable. In which case, lyophilization is a little more of a sure shot of being a stable formulation. So lyophilization might be a ready answer, a ready
Sure.
path to take for early phase clinical studies, just to avoid time for formulation development.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's helpful. Even I could understand that. So, yeah. So I'm going to ask the last one, right? And this is sort of going to end on a bit of a depends on your answer, but it could be one of those that could give us a lot of hope, or could give us a lot of worry, right? Um, we've seen coronaviruses before, so and this is technically named as SARS-CoV-2 because we've already seen a SARS-CoV-1 and we knew how to handle that. So we have seen coronaviruses before. Why is it so difficult to predict the impact of the virus on the body and develop a therapy or a vaccine around it?
So I don't think it's difficult to predict the impact on the body per se. I think the mechanism of the virus is fairly well understood and is not too different from the other SARS virus. I think the now that's again not really my area of expertise, but essentially it's a play between how harmful the virus is versus how easily transmissible it is. And what we know with a variety of other viruses is that some of them are very harmful but maybe not as transmissible. Some of them are easily transmissible, like a common cold, but not really that harmful. And there are some that where the onset of symptoms or onset of the disease is relatively rapid, so that you can isolate the person very quickly, and the person knows that they're sick already.
Yeah.
And these mutations in biological systems and viruses are random, but sometimes you get this unique combination where this particular virus is easily transmissible. It has a long latent period during which you really don't know that you have the disease, and then you're actually infectious during that time. And it is fairly, it has it can be fatal. Unfortunately, this virus has evolved to carry all of these properties together that make controlling it really difficult. If maybe one of these properties weren't there, it wouldn't be as bad, or wouldn't spread as quickly, or wouldn't would be easily manageable from a healthcare perspective.
Sure. Right. Well, Dhananjay, thank you. That was all.
I don't know if that was a hopeful answer or a
No, I think it is. It's a balanced answer, right? And life is all about balancing, right? So for all the attendees, thank you so much for joining in. We had about 71 people in total at the peak. Thanks for all your questions. I know we weren't able to ask and answer all of them, but please do write to team.syngene at syngeneintl.com, and we will make best efforts to respond to all of them. Once again, it's team.syngene at syngeneintl.com. So Dhananjay, on to you for your last words, and then we'll hang up.
No, it was a pleasure. I really enjoyed having this conversation. I'm very thankful to all the people who joined in. Thank you to my colleagues and my clients, all of whose experience, feedback, work, etc. is really what came out through me. Is really what all these people have been doing. So thanks to all of them, thanks to all participants, and thank you, Ashu, for giving me this opportunity today.
All right. Thank you, Dhananjay. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Stay tuned and connected with us on our LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook pages to get information on our next topic. It'll be as exciting and as interesting as the one we had today. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.